Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Way of the Showman, where we view the world through the lens of showmanship. I am Captain Frodo, and I will be your gracious host and guide along the way here today, as always. I did a charity gig here a couple of days ago now, and it was for refugees who have arrived in town here, and their kids and whatever. It was an outdoor gig, and it took me a little bit, as we say in Norway, it took me a little bit on the bed. I got a bit surprised or whatever. It was a tricky situation to get into. I mean, I'm sure it's complicated even for the people who have just arrived from all this craziness and carnage that they have left behind, and then to arrive here in this sleepy little seaside town, not knowing anyone and everything, and I felt so strong emotions that it was a bit hard to get started. And of course the kids were there. It was Easter. There was somebody dressed up as a bunny that was handing out chocolate eggs, which is lovely. And then I was doing shows, but it was almost like the work that I was doing before the show, just being there waiting to go on, and some kids that were coming up, and some of them that must have been here for some time because they spoke Norwegian, but they were with some of the other kids who definitely didn't speak it, and just conversations then back and forth, and they were asking and looking at my props and going, what is this and what is that? And then of course once I started, it's becomes sort of more formal, and you're trying to get their attention and trying to get them to clap and cheer, and they got into it, but it took a little while. And of course I had not quite prepared for how difficult the language thing would be, because many of them didn't speak English, or almost none of them spoke Norwegian, and certainly the people that I was there to really connect to, they didn't speak Norwegian. So there was some Norwegian people there, but I couldn't do a show aimed specifically at those. So I was like changing and chopping in my material and all of that. But after a little while we managed to get some games going, and it was all fun. But yet again, I just had the war is creeping up on us no matter how far away we think we are. It's a rough situation, and it's just hard to appreciate the difficulties that they all have gone through. So anyway, my heart goes out to everyone in Ukraine, and all the artists that have been displaced, and all those people who have had to leave their men behind in the country when they have escaped. I can't even begin to grasp all this, the impact of this. Yeah, my family went to Australia today, my wife and my daughter, and even just that is hard, they're flying away and being away for some time. So to leave under such unbelievably terrible circumstances as what people have to leave Ukraine, my heart really goes out to you all out there, and to all you performers when the call comes, or even step up and these people are out there. I'm sure they must eventually find their way to Australia as well. So yeah, step up there, make a difference. Just seeing those kids coming up, particularly there's kids that are laughing during the show, but to be there and to really connect, just have a chat and be silly before the show and afterwards, that really, it felt to me like it was making some sort of difference, which brings to mind the stories in Nalle's book, The Clown Manifesto, where he tells some incredible and moving stories of doing magic for these kids who have been through hell and survived, but to then come in and do some magic for them. Clown Manifesto, definitely a book for you to check out. And speaking of clowning, I asked in the last episode, going, what happened with the clown truth? Why did all of a sudden, whatever, it's like 30 people download an episode out of nowhere, more or less on the same day and a half. Everybody started downloading that particular episode, which is like episode, I can't even remember, but it's sometime in the very beginning of the first season. So everything plods along, but that was like, why is this? But then I I found out that it's mainly magicians that have been downloading it. And it is because, and I had forgotten that I'd done this, but I had been asked, I'm going to perform at a very cool magic convention in Italy that I've performed at one time before, a few years ago. It's called Masters of Magic. And this time it's going to be in Torino, and the program is looking hot and exciting. Anyway, all the magicians are being asked to give a little PDF or give a little something that, like a free gift that they can do to sort of give out to the people as they are subscribing or whatever, signing up to be part of the Magic Conference. And I sent in just a PDF of this essay of Clown Truth. So, and then on there it says that it's from The Way of the Showman. So people have found that episode through that. So all that other, that are sort of odd downloads around there, that is all coming from, mainly from magicians, which with no sort of connection or whatever. No, it does have a connection. It's to Jay Gilligan when he woke up one morning when he was doing the show Reflex that I worked on in New York, and all of a sudden there was 150 people who have found him and started following him on Instagram, and that was when Eric Delgadio had been and seen his show and then wrote a glowing review. I mentioned it. He wrote a glowing thing on Instagram or in social media and posted it, and all of a sudden, so yeah, there's some just influxes of magicians who are out there and their networks, and you see how one social network is sort of stirred up and how it actually generates into clicks through to your whatever it is that you're going on about, a show or Instagram or whatever. All right. We have kind of reached an end of one thing on our explorations along the way of the Showman. We have been looking at the Showman for quite a few episodes now, because we're looking basically at the 4 pillars of showmanship, which is the showman, it's the audience, and then it's the show. We've now finished our deep look at the showman, and we're about to move on to the audience, which we will get cracking on today. And we will get that. We're not going to go as deeply into the audience as we did into the showman. This time we will most likely, I will get the most of this as part of it. We will get that done in one episode. So without further ado or any jibber jabber, we will cut straight to the meat of the episode. Understanding the audience. Start with a little poem here. As for those of you who have memorized and go through the Illuminated Showman's Manifesto on a daily basis to deepen your understanding and perspective on showmanship, of which there no doubt are thousands of you, you might have noticed that there's not so much information in there, or many thoughts on the audience. There are some, which I will get back to, but to sort of remedy this, sometime in the depth of the pandemic last year, I wrote this. It starts the same way. I am a showman. You are the many as one, the all-seeing eye, the other, yet me. You are the many as one, the all-seeing eye, the other, yet me. Our dance creates the music. You are the meaning makers. Without you, I am no different from you. You make me me. You make me showman. So, yes, after a whole lot of explorations along the interesting side paths of the little candles or those who face the other way and entertainment contracts, we are now moving along to the next element of our 4 pillars of showmanship, namely the audience. Of course, we have already considered them, but I want to take another journey with the others or the audience as the sort of trailhead or starting point, and that is what we are doing here in today's episode. And this verse that I've written above here to expand on this, that there is perhaps not any new ideas included in it, but it's just expressed in this way a little bit more directly, I think. And I think sometimes when I think that I have already expressed something, it's quite oblique still. So, because in the manifesto we do find a lot, but we can find it by inference. We are told that a showman is someone who has walked with the crowd and turned around to face the others. And I take this to mean that there is nothing special about a showman except his calling to turn around and face the others with something to show. A showman is like anyone else, and he is one of the others. And from this we can also say that any one of the others is a potential showman, and that the showman is a potential audience member, which we all are. And when we know this, we have all the prerequisites to understand what an audience is made up of, namely people like us. Another thing I know is that when an audience meet me as a showman, they expect that I have something to show them. We get this from the manifesto. They expect that what I have to show is meaningful to them in one way or another, even if it's just some tricks, quick tricks to rest their attention on before flicking onto the next video on TikTok or YouTube. And they usually don't have any specific ideas as to what I am to present, or that there would be any deeper meaning behind the tricks and the circus skills, but they are expecting that you or me and our acts or shows will speak to them, that it will be intelligible, and that there is a kind of meaning in it. For the most, they think the purpose of a performer is to provide them with a good time. This is like a very deep understanding, I think, that we sometimes get confused as to whether they would actually want to see me squeeze through one racket, or do they want 2 rackets? Would they want 3 rackets, or would I juggle 3 balls, and would I then do the Mills Mess or the Rubinstein's Revenge, or should I just do the Cascade? They do not care about these things as long as they're having a good time. Very few people come to see our shows for you to push the envelope of art. At least on the sort of everyday shows, unless you're, organizing yourself a theatre show and you're getting the right people to come. But the conversation about circus as art is at a pretty rudimentary state here, where I am currently at. And even then, most of the jobs that I do. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit digressed here into something we're going to talk about in couple of episodes now when we start talking about art and entertainment as to what these things are. But anyway, for the most, they just think that the purpose of a performer is to provide them with a good time. If you provide them with that, you have been a meaningful contribution to their day. That might sound shallow, but that is most of the time the truth, the expectation, and also your contract with them. And as my good friend Jay Gilligan, which I mentioned before, he says, like, a show is the balance between what the audience wants or expects from you and what you want to show them. So a show is the balance between what the audience wants or expects from you and what you want to show them. So there's this sort of push and pull there, and their expectations are often quite simple, and they have bought a ticket and now they expect to have a good time. They arrive with an anticipation of some kind of experience and some kind of understanding, however abstract, as to what it is that they're going to partake in. They arrive, I would say, in a questioning mode, ready for you to express something. So they arrive with a kind of openness. And their contract does not usually include many clues or clauses on strict limitations to what that would produce, what that could be, that would produce that good time feeling. With this in mind, it is my firm belief that as long as you are also giving them a good time, you can do almost anything imaginable in the show. The good times are a kind of restriction, but nothing worthwhile can come into existence without friction and something pulling in the opposite way. So that's kind of some thoughts that are just surrounding this idea of what the audience is expecting and what do they come in with in the most sort of fundamental way. Of course, there are situations where they just come in and they go, okay, let me see, what is the deeper meaning of the red ball in your show? But those times that happen, you're very lucky that's the conversation that's going on. And I would love to talk to those of you who would be in that situation in most of your performances. Now, I think that my concept of what an audience is was created by magic. I think I got my deep interest in the audience from starting out as a magician, as a magician's assistant, or I guess when I say that I was a magician's assistant, I was just didn't know enough tricks or couldn't get it together to do it, but I wanted to be on stage. So I was sort of in my dad's show, and slowly as I got older, I got to do more and more acts of myself. So sort of like that's how I got into magic. And in any magic trick or act, the magician has to ask, what does the audience experience? What is their experiences? What is happening? And this is true of any art, of course, but it is especially true for magic, because there is always two levels to magic. There's the effect, which is what the audience experience when the magic trick happens, and then there is the method, which is what the magician does, which creates that effect that the audience experienced. So there's also the element of presentation, which goes into each trick, much in the way that the structure element in a show that we've talked about before. But for now, we will just focus on method and effect. And it's this sort of disconnect between the method and the effect which makes the magic happen in the spectator's experience. The effect might be that a coin is placed into the hand and then vanishes, and the method is the sleight of hand that made it only seem like the coin was placed into the hand, when in fact it was secretly palmed away in a fake transferal, such as a French drop or something. In magic, the experience of the audience is absolutely vital, since without an audience there actually isn't any magic, because the magic happens inside the spectator, or more apt, in the conversation between the magician and the audience. And this is so in an even more direct way than how we talked about the show only existing in a spectator's mind. A sculptor has a fair chance of experiencing his creation as an audience sees it. Not quite, but it's closer. He can stand back and he can look at the finished product and go, okay, here, this is a sculpture. It has these effects. He has more information about how it's created. But perhaps that does not make him any more odd. His approach more odd or different than what some other person would, watching it with their own prerequisites or pre-knowledge. So in the art of magic, though, this standing back and watching the magic, this isn't quite possible. The art simply does not really exist unless there is at least one spectator who can be baffled at the seeming impossibility of what's presented. This gap of experience between the method and the effect is the core part of the art of astonishment. The magician knows the method, hence can't fully experience the effect, the magical effect. The craft of magic is centered around creating experiences for spectators which the magicians themselves can't take part in. And at the magician's end, there is only a card not shuffled back into the deck and then shown to the audience member in some fancy way when you find it. And the fact that the card always was at the bottom of the deck, even though it looked like it was shuffled, is a non-event for the magician. If there was no gap between the method and the effect, it would be an absurd presentation. Perhaps an avenue for comedy performance, but it wouldn't quite be magic. It would be referencing magic, but it wouldn't have this phenomena of impossibility. Still be very funny. When you have kept the experience of the spectator and the effect in mind, a minor miracle can be experienced by them as you go through your method. You pick the card back up from the bottom of the deck, and the surprise of this, like the unexpected and impossible, the magic, can't be experienced by a magician since he knows the secret. But to the audience who just sees the card flipping out, all of a sudden goes, man, that's impossible, blah, blah, blah. Now, a painter creates the painting, and this object can be reason enough to make it. Even if no one buys any of your paintings, apart from one picture you sold to your brother, you could still become one of the greatest painters of all time, even after you're dead. That's what happened to Vincent van Gogh. After the painter put in the work, she has a result which exists in the world, a product. A magic is not an object. It is an experience. It's a process and not a thing. Everything is, of course, a process, but we won't go into that. One could argue that a musician can play their violin and enjoy the result of their own music, even if it is difficult. It's maybe probably not impossible. When a virtuoso on a harpsichord can eventually hear through his technique and experience the music themselves as well. You need to practice until you get all the way to the end. And this isn't possible for a magician. You don't accidentally watch yourself from the outside and go, holy, where did that card come from? Man, that it was fairly shuffled into the deck, because you know that it never was, so you don't have that experience. And without an audience, there is literally no magic. The magician's art does not exist without the audience. At the end of the day, it would be rare indeed for to find a musician that had no desire for their music ever to be heard by an audience. So, still. Rehearsing with video or a mirror, the latest moves that you've found on YouTube or in a magic book, does not quite teach you how to create the magic in the spectator's mind. It only teaches the moves of the trick, which, in the presence of some other human, you can work out your timing with, and the ways you can make magic happen for a spectator, which, after all, is the only place it happens, as we've gone through at some length now. Magic is about perception and about how we discover truth. And this becomes another personal proof to the concept that I've found to share with Gadamer, that art only becomes art when it is experienced by someone, and that it causes some change in them. Since this direct and complete dependence of an audience for the magic to exist was my first encounter with the craft of showmanship, I think this relationship of what does the audience feel, what does the audience think, and what is the audience's experience of what it is that I'm doing has forever colored my relationship to, and thus my conceptions of whom the audience is, and what the audience actually is. One thing that I do know that they are as well is that they are smarter than us. In an interview with Teller from the magic duo Penn and Teller, it was an interview, so he does talk, although not on stage. He's a very smart guy. He talks about how in their work they always assume that their audience is smarter than them. When they create the magic, they assume that the audience will be able to get the references, and that they will be smart enough to see through simple or indeed quite complex subterfuge. I think this is a significant reason of why Penn and Teller's work is so clever and innovative. I think many performers don't make this kind of attitude fundamental in their work, and it shows. And I take this as a good practical example of how your conception of the audience can directly influence the work that you create. Like we've talked about in the last episode, that the model that we choose to understand something determines not only what we find, but also directly it influences what we create. So thinking that it does matter that the audience, that you have stuff in there because they are smart enough, and you'll go out in front of them and you go, oh, they'll think I'm a bit shallow, so I better up my game. That's a good position to be in. So, the audience is a complex element, and we're going to see if we can hone in on this thing that I mentioned in the beginning of the many becoming one. We've touched on that bit before. But an audience, complex element, it's both singular and multiplicious, or multiplicitous, or like it's many and one at the same time. An audience is many, it's made up of many individuals, yet in the process of showmanship, they are also one. For this reason, I find it valuable to think of them as the many as one. Going back to our sort of archetypal performer on the market square from the manifesto, we learn that one of the first things that must happen for a street show to be successful is that a random crowd of people, bystanders and onlookers, must be shaped and transformed into an audience. This process is, I think of this as the making of the many into one, is to create that group feeling and cohesion and coherence. In an indoor performance setting, then the transformation of a crowd of many into an audience as one begins already when they gather in the vestibule of the theatre or the foyer of a circus. For a theatre or a circus crowd, it might even begin in embryo when they see a poster on a lamppost or an ad in the paper, and they decide they want to take a chance and see the show. So on our symbolic market square, the transformation, though there it begins as soon as the first few have gathered. The potential for transformation arises as soon as a few gathers around the showman. And in the market square, the showman's gravity captures the people, and he becomes the center around which they at first are individual parts, but as their sort of orbital paths, the paths of energy becomes solidified, there is a change, and they become a kind of solar system. Many, but connected into one new entity. Like there's many planets in our solar system, all connected to. That's what I'm trying to paint here. And as the audience begins to care about the showman as a character, their attention develops into interest. And something takes shape, something organic and oddly alive, and they're about to go from being individuals gathered looking, a couple on a shopping trip and a family of tourists enjoying the sun and the freedom of a new city, finds themselves transforming into an audience. And on the street, the crowd does usually not transform into an audience until they are brought in. Like this is a necessary part of any street show. It's like after you've gathered a good-sized crowd scattered around you, you tell them that the show is starting. You might draw a line on the ground with chalk or mark it with water or lay down a rope. When I used to do a straitjacket escape, I would put my chain down, and even though it didn't go all the way around, I would sort of just pull them in. And then you ask the crowd to just step up to the line. And this forms a sort of solid wall, which serves many purposes. For one, random pedestrians don't just walk through your pavement stage, and the random passers-by can't see the performance now. So it means you sort of create an inside and an outside. The many in a circle around a showman creates this sort of inside and outside, but also by asking them to come together and to create the performance space, you're kind of asking them to commit. And we are all afraid of commitment. So at this point in the street show process, there is almost inevitably a bit of sort of walk-off. That is, that some of the crowd decides to leave, and this is okay, because you don't just want people to non-committally watch you like a crowd looks at a car crash. You want them to become an audience, and for this to happen, there's got to be a commitment. Not a very big commitment. They can still leave, but if they choose to stay, then they must shuffle forward and join the emerging of the audience, of them becoming, the many becoming one. So when you ask them to step up to the line, you separate the wheat from the chaff. Those who step up to the line are committed and have successfully begun the transformation into an audience. In the phase transition from many to one, they take on a kind of group identity. The organism of the audience has its own self-awareness. The individuals are not in control exactly of who or what the organism turns into, although a few excited and authentically enthusiastic individuals can do a lot to set the tone and the development and ultimate personality of the many as one. Every individual reads the subtle and the not-so-subtle clues from the others around them, which they now find themselves united with. And this is like how the complex murmurations of starling flocks of birds across the sky is made possible from only a very few parameters, such as the distance each bird has to each other. And just by knowing that, through these sort of very simple parameters, amazing aerial acrobatics and gorgeous displays emerge with three-dimensional shapes. So sometimes the individuals of the crowd resist the walking forwards, other times they join in willingly. Much of this is down to the expertise and the craftsmanship of the showman, and the trust he manages to install in them. The showman can mold his audience, but only so far, only to a certain extent. And this combinatory organism of an audience is fleeting, never seen before, never to be seen again. It has its own mood and its own way of being. It is a unique conglomerate of consciousnesses which very quickly finds this collective identity with its own and forms its own kind of personality. I mean, there are some similarities between getting your street crowd to step up to the line and getting your circus crowd to buy a ticket. The stepping up to the line in a street show is an act of commitment, and the people purchasing the ticket for a ticketed show is also an act of commitment. They commit to the entertainment contract that you're offering. And this thing with the different personalities of a crowd, like when we were doing shows in Las Vegas in Opium at the Cosmopolitan Casino, and you're doing 10 shows a week, night after night after night, or 12 years with La Soirée touring around, and there we did 8 shows a week. On 6 days, you're in the same venue sometimes for like 9 months or whatever, and you just seeing how different the audience, meaning the group of them, then ends up becoming, and how certain days you come in and you just can't get them, and everyone is like talking backstage of how, oh man, so what an odd reaction to the crowd. And probably on a spectrum, we're sort of hovering between 5 and 8 or whatever, because by the time the show is good and you get them and the people are having a great time, yet they all have this, as a group, that you see how different it can be one night compared to the next, like how different it is on a Friday to a Saturday, and also then on a Tuesday, like with La Soirée. I remember there was very often that it was sold out first on Saturdays or whatever, Fridays and Saturdays. They were sold out, and that it is a certain type of audience that if we arrived in Sydney and sometimes there the season would be practically sold out before we arrived, and but the people who get their business, not the business cards, their credit cards out and decides, okay, in 6 weeks on the Friday we're going to be at this show. That's a different kind of person, and has a different kind of personality than the kind of people who in the last minute goes, oh man, it's still available some tickets for that show on the Tuesday night. Let's go. And the vibe that you get on those is different than you get on a Friday. So there's all these kind of parameters of what the people have been doing. But even though it's random, they still then end up conglomerating into going from many ones into one group of many, and one organism in itself. And this thing can change dramatically from one moment, from one night to the next. And in an inside show, the individual spectators are always kind of further along on the path of becoming an audience than a crowd stopped on the street. Thus they sort of come together quicker, usually in the first few minutes, 5 minutes or whatever. And as this happens, the showman needs to be very aware to sort of tune into the crowd if he or she is to have any chance of truly connecting with them. This is also why so much care and thought needs to be put into how your show or your act begins, as the first impressions are incredibly important and influential on your audience formation. And I'd say that, but if you're going to come and see Bob Dylan, or you're going to see whatever a band that you already like, then I guess you have already got that ongoing relationship, so it might be slightly different. Yet they will still go through that same thing. who I did listen to an interview with somebody who, anyway, talking about this exact kind of stuff of where you're going by the time you've been an artist and you've had 30 albums over 30 years or whatever, and that you still, the audience comes in and has all these completely different sort of reactions to you. So I guess it's another example, a pretty bad anecdote. I can't verify it with more details than that, but people more experienced than me have also seen these things. How you meet your audience will always be shaping your ongoing relationship. Now, in an outdoor show, a considerable amount of attention from the showman needs to be put into gathering a crowd and shaping them into that audience. And once that is done, the showman needs to be vigilant to sort of make sure that they remain an audience and don't revert back into a crowd or all the way back into individuals again. And there are less distractions inside in a dark theater or big top, the venue shape and the seats in rows that all aids the ability to focus your audience. Now this means that you stand freer to present more complex material. If the material on the street takes your full attention for a long period, so that you can't pay proper attention to the audience, chances are that you'll lose maybe quite a few of them. Material which is subtle or is building towards something which becomes beautiful in half an hour, but is a bit slow and boring then along the way, then many of them will walk off. On the street there is a greater need for immediate satisfaction and continued effort in keeping your audience from leaving. Audience members can leave an indoor show, but it is less common, and they need to like you less maybe and to be more annoyed before they leave than on the street. Now, it's not easy to become an audience. It's not easy for an audience to become an audience, because being an audience member is really a magnanimous or generous position to take. It's not necessarily an easy role to take. Like how students must open themselves to learning in a school or university, an audience must open themselves to another, to an other. To assume this role, you need to take on a certain humility. To study and learn is to admit to oneself that you're not already perfect. There are still things that you don't know. There is always room for improvement. As you learn the knowledge, the knowledge that is acquired becomes a part of you and you grow. Being an audience is to open yourself for growth. There is still room for expansions of yourself. Lessons learned can also be negative, of course. So when a show you watch is terrible, when you find a comedian offensive or an opera too pretentious, there is still something to learn. And when you look at it from this point of view, you can learn just as much about yourself through encounters with something that you don't like. All show folk are audiences in other aspects of their life. We are never done, never finished in our development as human beings or as artists. There is always a greater conversation to be included in. We must open ourselves and expand. Like when I expanded the scope of my character to also be a magician, which I talked about in the Triangle Eye chapter. It's the showman's ability to also be audience in the times where he or she isn't performing. The constant expansion and pursuit of inspiration and learning keeps us relevant as artists. Very often when an artist feels stale, it is because they've forgotten to take on the role of audience often enough in their off-stage lives. So this brings us to me thinking about connections. Because, we'll go into it now. Being lost in a crowd at a show or a concert, I have at times felt like the singer in a band, or even the exact way that the Chemical Brothers mixed one track into the next, as if they were both driving me forward and responding sort of directly to the way that I was feeling in that exact moment, like they were performing and shaping their show in a direct response to me and how I felt, like we were in tune and resonant, like I was a guitar lying on a piano. This is the feeling of connection, and it's a very pleasant and enriching feeling. We could, of course, dismiss this connection by saying that it's just an illusion. But in another sense, it is also exactly what is happening. The performers are talking to me, but to me as part of the many as one. They are talking directly to me. This is also like it's connected to this thing of when I look out at the audience and I look at a crowd as like I'm looking at one group of them over there. We'll get back to this, but you always feel, even though I'm looking at a general direction, everybody feels like I'm looking straight at them. I think we'll get back to that. But to forge connections and to connect deeply is the whole point of a performance. It is the very aim of a show, a syncing up, in a way, of individuals. And it's that syncing, when we get those connections and when we sync up, that's when we are sort of becoming one group and the show really starts to emerge. And that's an exalted feeling of, oh, I get it, I understand, and it can be profoundly meaningful. Like, I understand what this person is talking about, or the music that they're playing is really speaking to me. And in hindsight, it might be difficult to express exactly what one got, what wisdom you gleaned from the concert, but that moment of understanding, brief as it might be, might become pivotal, a fulcrum that leverages real change in the spectators in large or small ways. Now, the performers are performing to the audience as a group, but also to each spectator individually. The connection does not lie in the way they perform it. The many ways one hope for the audience to connect and find resonance with us performers, we keep this in mind through the creation of our material, which has been artistically shaped to be as meaningful as possible, which is done by having many points for the audience, like points, or hooks maybe. There's a better way to explain it, like that the material has been given hooks or points for the audience to connect to, or sort of and these moments have been shaped into an act, and you're doing it, and you want them to connect to it, because we keep the audience in mind. I do, and this is what I'm urging you to do too, that we keep the audience in mind when we create. We want as many points of potential connection, as many hooks as possible built into our piece. Like, we sense the meaning in a song being sung, or the beats being played, or the acrobatic feats being shown. And the best works of art has the power to really connect to practically every human being. Of all the things human beings encountered, there's a big claim, shows and painted artworks, poetry, and arguably these kinds of artworks is what in existence speaks most directly to us. Most directly to us. Shows, painted art, artworks, poetry speaks most directly to us. Seeing a lake or the light of a sunrise appearing over a mountain ridge is expressive, but not in the same immediate way a showman on a stage is. In these meetings where a conscious human looks at another human, we get a mysterious intimacy which can grip our entire being. Of course, nature encounters can also do that, but it is a difference in kind. In such moments of connection between performer and audience, or between two people, it is as if there is no distance at all between them. No distance at all between the spectator and the show. And it's like the show has emerged, and in this show moment, the spectator and the performer merges together in a third new thing. There are even, if only in brief moments, complete sort of mind melds where the encounter with a showman becomes an encounter with oneself, and by extension the world. The showman and the audience looks at each other, meeting in the area of interest, the midway, each influencing and urging the other to extend themselves further into their roles, making the process a feedback loop of complete interconnectedness, where the audience wants the showman to become as much a showman as they can be, and the audience wants to watch, and this is this feedback loop. So the many as one. Let's look a little more at this phenomena where an audience member gets such a strong connection in a show that they feel the performers speaking directly to them. That's what we were talking about before. Or that they, in sort of particular, that they feel like they are singled out for special attention. And this is, as I have already mentioned, simultaneously true and untrue. There are many ways this experience can happen. One example is, of course, the showman is looking at a section of the audience, and perhaps 10 or 50, depending on the size of the audience and stage, all feel like a genuine connection was made in that look, that he was looking directly at them, thus creating the imaginary connective threads that we talked about in the looking chapter, under the sort of imaginary threads heading. The difference there, or the difference here, is that as you look at a section, 50 threads of connection is being activated. There's a thread now between you and them, and they felt like that little look that you gave to that side was a direct response to them for what was going on in their exact experience of what was happening. Now, this phenomena occurs because the distance between the crowd and the showman is big enough so that you can't work out exactly what they're looking at. Humans are exquisitely well adapted biologically and socially to work out exactly what others are looking at, but these adaptations work best when we are in close proximity. If we all sit in a living room, for instance, at a party, we can very accurately ascertain what someone is looking at. Usually not just who they are looking at, but even which part of that person's body caught their attention. The act of being checked out, that somebody looks you up and down, is very visible even across a room. If the distance between the showman and the audience is large, the audience will lose the accuracy of interpreting the gaze. So this is maybe it's like a more sort of rational approach to it, but it's fun to imagine that when the showman looks at any members of the audience, they all feel looked at, like I'm looking at them, like how we feel looked at when somebody looks at our hand. It's mine, and it is peripherally me, but they're still looking at me. Like, the joy of one of us becomes the joy of all of us, like Todd Browning says in the introduction to the 1932 movie Freaks. This state of group self-identification, if we're just having a little fun with this, but then if it could be some sort of a transcendental experience, a form of slightly altered consciousness, that when one person is you're looking at just one section of the crowd, that they all kind of still feel like he's talking to us. We are one, so they're talking to us when they're saying something specific to an individual or whatever. It does not happen every show, and perhaps certain mind-altering substances like alcohol, marijuana, or psychedelics can amplify or facilitate this experience of deep connection. Repetitive beats, chanting, or singing along to a song everybody knows can also aid in this group unification. This might be like the most abstract or extreme example. I don't know if it's true, but it would be nice to think that we all have that group self that goes that far. Certainly maybe in a big shamanistic ceremony or something, or with some ritualistic music, that you really sort of feel like everyone is feeling the same thing. When you look around a crowd and you look at someone's face and you just go, yes, I can feel this too. We are sharing in this experience, like responding directly to the drum solo or to a guitar god playing some excellent tunes. So let's finish here with a brief little image to contemplate. So if we go back to our humble street performer on the market square from the Illuminated Manifesto, as he begins his show, the crowd gathers around him, and with the spectators encircling him, eyes aimed at him, they form the circumference of a circle with the showman at the center. All the crowd's sight lines are the radius of a circle divided into an endlessly sliced pie chart by the imaginary threads created between the showman and his audience. And the showman is now the center point, and they are all the periphery of the same circle. And from a mythic point of view, the many as one can, through another, perhaps smaller transcendent leap, include the one in the center. And the showman is now becoming a part of the audience organism and their group self, thus completing the circle with the periphery and the center into one entity, so that the many becoming one, and that the one then becomes part of the one facing the other way at the center of the circle, so that the many becomes one, and that one then becomes part also of the one facing the other way at the center of the circle. In this way, the process of showmanship, of unification, of seeing and showing, seeing and being seen, then becomes complete. It's all one. I am one with all. I'll have one with all. Now, what was that? Anyway. In this way, the process of showmanship, of unification, of seeing and showing, seeing and being seen, and the many becoming one, is complete. We have arrived at the midway. The show is complete. And there we go. Another episode comes to an end. We have contemplated the audience and a lot of digressions there. I had a lot of stuff that popped into my head, not all fully formed. Sometimes the smartest things don't come from the top of my head. But yeah, good things like this, keeping the audience in mind, and how the magic and the magician and how magic don't exist at all. I like that concept, and I think it's interesting of having this. Now I'm just reflecting on what it was that I read today, like with that many becoming one, and that can go all the way so that we all just become one. That must be one of the deep sort of evolutionary or sociological aspects of what it is that we do at all, what showmanship is and the function that it has. And it still has now. Because again and again when I perform these days, I did a gig the other day for some students here in town, because it's hard to get the students out to do stuff now. There's been 2 years where it hasn't happened, and I'm sure certain places it just goes back in and it's like it never has been, but on smaller campuses and things, it can be hard to sort of get that sociality back again, because some of the things that should have happened now hasn't happened. For 2 years, orientation weeks and the kind of things that they normally do that would help people connect to each other. So you're well on your way through your studies and you haven't connected as a group yet. So still, that's a really important thing, and we are important players in that. And the gig that I did the other day, just really, it went off so hard that I got one more gig kind of immediately from it. So they had another one somewhere else, and they just booked me just the day after, I think, for one more. So it's good. We do good. I also really like this thing that being an audience, to really open yourself up to take something in, that I have to be better at that too. Like, I don't know everything, and when somebody's speaking or somebody's watching a lecture, you're doing something to me, are you open enough? And even if that what you're watching, it doesn't resonate with you, that's it's still a lesson learned. So with that idea of everything becoming one, I would think I've said everything that needs to be said. Please share this if you like it. Share it with your friends. If you don't like it, tell somebody that they have to listen to it, or else they'll get bad marks on their next test, or something like that. Punish them by doing it. You can find me on social media as Captain Frodo or Frodo Santini. I'm at Frodo Santini on Instagram too now. And if you have a project or an idea that you would like to explore in depth, or you want me to join you in a creation, then feel free to reach out. My email is thewayoftheshowman@gmail.com, and if you want to buy me a virtual coffee, you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/CaptainFrodo. It's been a pleasure to have this little walk with you along the way of the Showman yet again, and thanks for tuning in. And until next time, take care of yourself and those you love, and I hope to see you along the way.